Hi everyone. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to do another video, this time comparing and contrasting the ENTP and INTJ in a way that is explained correctly. Um, if you'd like to explore any of these different things I'm talking about in greater detail and to really gain an understanding of socionics, I'd strongly recommend purchasing my course. It's only £300, brought down from £600 back in the day. That will give you all this knowledge and more. What I'm simply doing is rehashing it in sort of a very sort of quick form without really going into the understanding of exactly why it is like this. If you find yourself asking, why is it like this? Then the course is for you. Okay, so let's dive now into the ENTP versus the INTJ. So when it comes to these types, they are based on the superficial MBTI way. They're similar, but they share two letters. You can see they both share the N and the T. They're both intuitive and they're both thinkers or logical types. And yes, this is certainly important for understanding their shared strengths. Both these types are intuitive and logical. They are both naturally at home with abstract concepts, different ideas, and how they fit together and make sense. They are both types which are trying to engage in the intellectual. Now, there's another thing which makes them even more similar, and this is the values. Not only do they have the same strengths in that respect, but they also have the same values, and this is decided by a number of dichotomies. First of all, they are both identifiers, which means they are preoccupied with how close things are together, and yes, given the fact that they are also both world acceptors and clarity seekers, they are types that, in terms of how close things should be together, they're interested in how they are fit, how closely they can be made to align together and come together. So really, the nature of these two types, which I would call the alpha NTs, is that they're trying to engage in the intellectual sphere or plane, as it were, to find ways of explaining how everything fits together. They are the grand theorists. They're the ones who like to account for all the different possibilities to find certain principles or philosophies or frameworks which really allow us to have an aligned understanding of our reality. So yeah, that is a key thing which they are similar. They are very much engaging in that kind of space. You will be seeing a lot of these types in philosophy, in theoretical cosmology, in anything which is really coming up with grand theories. Now, so I've talked about these things in which they are very, very similar. I would also say that both the ENTP and INTJ, within their quadra, they're also antithetic types. So if you think of the quadra as one which is trying to bring everything together, align things, a sort of a social harmony and intellectual harmony, everyone getting along, everyone having fun together, they're antithetic because neither of these types naturally immediately gel the idea of being sort of social collectivists. Because they come from a very intellectual bent rather than a social bent, which is more natural, I'd say, of alpha. They have to go through a kind of journey of understanding that actually they do want to belong. They do like it when people respond positively to their ideas. And so they stop being so weird and sort of eccentric and sort of out of things and start to become more involved in what people are doing and invested in communities and sort of social circles. So they both have that same kind of journey, which an antithetic type has to go on, a journey of discovering their values and sort of then actually accommodating themselves to it, or really going through a journey of self-growth in that respect. But in doing so, they then bring something new, which is the more sort of free-thinking intellectual side, which social collectivism without that would just be a bunch of sheep or lemmings, you could say. Yeah, so these are the ways in which they are the same, right? Question is now, how are they different? Oh, I forgot one thing, which is that they're both also reductivist in their temperament. They both tend to see things as different parts bolted together rather than one kind of amorphous whole, you could say. So they're reductivists rather than holist, which makes sense for their understanding of different theories and how they all fit together and make sense. It's not, they can be quite particular in terms of what particular axiom is and what that's leading to and what the possibilities as a result are. So that's also something which they share. Now, how are they different? Well, we can see the main difference, wasn't the main difference, but one of the most superficial differences in terms of first letter. One's an extrovert or energizer, one's an introvert or integrator. One is expanding and increasing the breadth and quantity of things. The other one is refining that quantity to quality. So if you combine that with the last letter, as you see there, in which they're different, which is one's a rational type, one's an irrational type, while keeping in mind that they both share in that reductivism, you see a difference in the way in which their attention works, their energy signature works, you could say. ENTP is characterized by a certain sort of chaotic hopping from one area of interest to another area of interest at quite a rapid rate. INTJs do not have anything like that kind of rapidity. Instead of a sort of quickly hopping attention on different things, they have a very much a fixed attention on a particular thing, and they will hold that thing in their attention until something breaks or snaps in terms of it doesn't quite work, it's not quite perfectly fitting together, and then their attention will go to something else and they'll focus on that instead. It's a far more I wouldn't say a traumatic break, but it's like it takes a while or for them to suddenly shift. And when they do shift, though, like the ENTP, it's a sudden movement to something else. But the idea really is that whereas the ENTP is quite rapid in thinking across different possibilities, the INTJ is far more focused on particular axioms and principles and really holding onto them in almost a chaotic, idealistic fashion, which, yes, takes a long time to break from reality. Well, it's a long time to be broken by reality, I should say. They aren't the quick hoppers. Instead, they are very much the sort of almost more sort of fragile fixers. Fragile in terms of, yes, it can break. As soon as something comes in to cause it to break, because it's not a perfect theory, there's some cause for a doubt in it, there's some other possible way of looking at it, then yes, then it will break. Then the theory will no longer work and they'll be considering something else. But it's not like they're constantly hopping in the way that the ENTP is. So that's a difference in terms of the energy signature, their temperament, you could say. But there are other ways in which they're different. Another way is that where one is stubborn, the other one's actually very flexible, and vice versa. So the ENTP is stubborn in terms of their intuition and their ethics, their feeling. Stubbornness is not something you know in MBTI, but socionic stubbornness is actually an important thing. It's what is what you decide on your own terms. And the ENTP decides on their own terms in terms of intuition and feeling. So they are a type which is very much about, oh, this is good, this is great, we should be excited about this, we should say yes to these ideas and possibilities. And they can be quite insistent on that. The INTJ doesn't make anywhere near the same kind of insistences here. Neither do they disagree. They just don't have the same stubbornness here, which actually means they complement and work quite well with the ENTPs, where the ENTP pushes, the INTJ actually gives way, and vice versa. And what's the vice versa? Well, the INTJ is instead very stubborn in their sensation and in their logic or their thinking. So for the INTJ, it's far more about how comfortable or elegant or aesthetically pleasing things seem and fit together very elegantly, and does it fundamentally make sense and all fit together perfectly into, yes, the sort of the perfect system of how it all fits together. And so they can be very stubborn on that. They can be very stubborn on their physical space and things, throwing things out of that perfection, or things not making sense and sort of grinding the gears and unpleasantly in terms of, oh dear, that's inconsistent, that doesn't quite work or fit together. So they can get very, very peeved over that, and they can be quite stubborn in ensuring that everything is kept perfectly aligned, and they hate the idea of people going in and interfering and chopping things up and ruining it and making it more efficient, even if it completely bastardizes the sort of purity of the theory in which they've actually been working on. So the ENTP is far more flexible in that area. They'll give way to the INTJ in that area, so vice versa. So because of that, these types actually complement and work very well with each other because they're not actually competing in the same areas, despite the fact they have the same strengths and same values. And also, I would say is that one is really an affirming approach, a sort of more sort of, yay, I'm very sort of positive around the virtue of decency, that things are good. But in the same way, the INTJ takes a more denying approach to a different virtue, which is one of achievement. The INTJ is not really about, their view of achievement really is to sit in perfection. It is not to constantly update and increase. And by doing so, they deny, as it were, the ever updating nature of achievement. The INTJ isn't looking to ever update. They're looking to find perfection. They're constantly worrying that things are not quite perfect in terms of their understanding of it being the real truth, as it were. So they're constantly doubting and wondering what else it could be, and never quite reaching the point where something can be worked on and taken forwards. So what that can mean for them is, that they when they do find things that fit together, they want to sort of keep it and hang on to it, and don't like to have things messed with, because it will take ages to find another way for the stars to align perfectly for that thing to really fit together as the logical theory of it really makes sense. So that is more of a sort of denying approach, and more sort of I'm not doing that particular virtue. Oh, I'm resisting that particular virtue, as opposed to I'm pushing forward that particular virtue. Another way in which they are different is that the ENTP is space locked and site locked, and the INTJ is time locked and speech locked. So the ENTP's natural asymmetries are of really, really focusing on new ideas and possibilities, and on applying practical, sort of practical, more pragmatic, fact-driven ways of understanding how things are and making them work. So they're innovative problem solvers, you could say. This comes at the expense of really the day-to-day detail and personal attitudes. So they're really, really bad in terms of the day-to-day maintenance of things, and sort of the deeper personal, sort of subjective evaluations of what they like, what they dislike, what other people like and dislike in terms of personal boundaries and relationships. They're just not very good at that area. Whereas the INTJ, they don't have that kind of asymmetry. Instead, their asymmetry is different. They're very, very focused on the logical analysis of how things fit together and where is it all going in the long run. So far more strategic analysis at the expense of any kind of sort of mood generation of getting people motivated and creating urgency and action in the here and now. So INTJs are very good at sort of the longer term analysis. They can make great actuaries, for instance, but they wouldn't make very good sort of crowd managers. They have very little presence in the here and now. So it would be very difficult for them to do that. Whereas the ENTP can probably do some of that. So this is the idea, really. The ENTP could do actuarial work, as it were. They could do more strategic analysis. They could also do some of the crowd movement side. They can flex in either. The INTJ can't. But the INTJ can do a mix of a sort of more innovative problem solving and a sort of more one-to-one, more sort of managing sort of the personal one-to-one relationships and maintaining the day-to-day details to a certain degree in a way which an ENTP can't. So in this respect, they have, even though their strengths are the same, the particular emphases on the strengths and the particular areas of real weakness are very different, which is why a good way of telling apart an ENTP and INTJ is looking really at their use of extroverted feeling versus introverted sensing. The INTJ is really going to have a hard time creating that sort of charismatic presence, whereas you might see some of that from an ENTP. But the ENTP is going to really struggle with sort of maintaining things. It's going to be a bit of a mess in terms of the day-to-day details and remembering particular things which are very, very personal, whereas an INTJ can keep track of that to some degree, certainly more than the ENTP. So you look at those things that can help you very quickly tell them apart. So what else can I say about how they are different? Well, a remaining way in which they are different is that one is a clockwise type, the other one's an anti-clockwise type. Why is that? What does that mean? So one is sort of advancing social progress, the clockwise type, the ENTP. The other one kind of ratchets that back a little bit each time. So why? What's going on? So the ENTP, as I've said in other videos, they kind of throw lots of ideas at the wall to see what sticks. And doing so, there's usually someone else who says, no, that idea doesn't work, I'm quite uncomfortable about that, etc. So eventually they find ideas which kind of move things forward. The INTJ doesn't really do that. Instead, for them, they go about things in a far more, well, first of all, they have a sort of more, what would I say? It's more integrating, first of all, so it's focusing in rather than expanding out. But in doing so, and being a denier type, what they end up doing was focusing on things with almost the expectation of, it's not going to work out eventually. There's going to be something imperfect about it, something which is not going to cause it to really be the truth. And so I'm going to be very open-minded and almost inviting this sort of understanding almost to fail. At which point they'll then find something else to really think about in terms of, okay, is this the way of looking at it? Essentially, INTJs are types which end up really in a sense of analysis paralysis, painstakingly thinking through ideas of all different angles to see if it all makes sense or not, and ending up frequently doubting that it does work. Where I've typed ENTPs and I've said they are said type, yeah, they embrace it straight away. It's very difficult to get an INTJ to embrace things straight away. They'll always have that niggling doubt, and they'll start thinking, well, maybe I could also be this, and maybe I'm this, and maybe I could look at it in this way and it'll be different to that. And so as a result, they are sort of looking for whatever it is, asking sort of the questions which end up breaking the particular mode or theory they've come up with. And the ENTP, on the other hand, they're far more confident taking forwards some ideas, of proposing new ideas, right? With not necessarily the view that it's absolutely right, it can't possibly change. They have more of a view of, let's try it out and see what works, and let's put something into action and get things going forwards. So as a result, the INTJ becomes more of an anti-clockwise type and sort of ratchets things back a little bit, whereas the ENTP is really the one throwing the ideas at the table, which actually then moves society forwards in some kind of way. Often you'll find that the ENTP has come up with new ideas of innovation to take things forward in some way. The INTJ has usually written some sort of deep analysis into the nature of things, which ends up staying quite academic and doesn't often give very clear solutions or outcomes in order to actually then taking that forwards in some sort of way. So the INTJ doesn't not push forwards into the next part, into beta, in a way which an ENTP sets things up far more readily for things to then transition from alpha into beta. Anyway, I hope that was helpful in terms of my view of the different ways in which ENTP and INTJ are the same but also different. And yeah, if you'd like to find out more, please purchase my course. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.